This difficult situation we call a dark night of the soul, a spiritual transformation disguised as suffering. In this video, I'm going to break down the signs and symptoms of a dark night of the soul, as well as, most importantly, how to navigate this powerful shift. So stick around, because what feels right now like the end may actually be a new beginning for you. So to get started, what is this dark night of the soul? Well, a dark night of the soul isn't just about feeling down. It's a really deep, intense spiritual crisis. It's a moment in life where everything you thought you knew crumbles, and you're forced to face your true self. In these moments, it's like the universe is stripping away illusions, false beliefs, and attachments that no longer serve you. But in the moment, it can absolutely feel like you're losing everything. But here's the thing, it's not actually a punishment, even though it certainly feels like it when you're going through it. It's really a rebirth. But to get to that rebirth, you have to walk through the darkness first. So I want to add here, if you're going through a really difficult period of your life, and you think it could be like a dark night of the soul like this, whether it is or isn't, really look into the options that you have. And don't be afraid to ask for help, whether that's talking to a close friend or a family member, or even getting, professional help. I'm not a doctor, I'm not licensed in anything, but it's certainly important that whenever we go through difficult times in life, that we get the help that we need. So while I'm approaching this from a spiritual perspective, also remember that there are times that it's healthy and normal and good to get outside help, and that may mean, in one of these cases, professional help as well. So again, a disclaimer, I'm not a medical doctor, I can't give you medical advice, but if you are going through a really rough patch like this, in addition to looking at it from a spiritual perspective, it can be very helpful to get the right kind of professional help that you need. So now, what are the very common signs and symptoms of a dark night of the soul? So overall, it's just a period where you feel disconnected from everything, where your old routines, your old ways of doing things just aren't enough. It's like you can remember that old version of yourself in the past, and you wonder, am I ever going to feel like back to normal again? One common theme is like this overwhelming sense of emptiness. You just you go throughout your day and you do the things you typically would, but the things that used to excite you, even your hobbies, or if you love your job or relationships, they don't have the same meaning. They don't have the same weight. It's just all feels sort of empty. Another very common sign is just a loss of identity. You start questioning, like, who am I really? Maybe you've had an identity, a really strong one, through your job, and that's been really pleasing to your ego. Maybe you make a lot of money, you have a great job, but you start to maybe not resonate with that person you were before. But at the same time, it's a little scary, because you don't really want that old lifestyle, but at the same time, you don't know who you want to become either. During a dark night of the soul, it's also very common to feel like this really deep emotional pain. There's like a deep sadness often, this really deep sadness and feelings of despair, almost like mourning something that you can't really name. It's like this feeling of grief, but you don't really know what you're grieving. It's just this feeling of grief and disconnection, and a really, difficult and, negative experience to go through. And because of all this, another very common sign is just isolation and loneliness. You tend to withdraw from others during this time, not because you want to, but because you feel like no one else would understand what you're going through. And here I just want to mention again, it's really important during these times in our life, including like a dark night of the soul, to get the right help. So only you know what is best for you. But if that includes talking to a close friend or family member, or even a medical professional, then by all means do it. Make sure you have the support structure and get the help that you need, especially during a really difficult time such as this. And another way to think about a dark night of the soul is like an existential crisis. You just start questioning everything. It could be, you could have like the deepest held beliefs that have remained the same since childhood. Maybe your religion, or certain hobbies, or certain maybe political, views on things. It could be anything. But you start questioning all of these really deeply held beliefs, and even the meaning of life itself. Like when you start to really dig down and think about, well, why do I act this way? Why am I this way? Why is that my identity? You start to question like the very pillars of like who you are as a person. And this can be a very like disconcerting thing to go through. Another very common sign is just feeling like your old dreams and goals just don't fit this new version of you anymore. And again, it has to do with sort of knowing that you don't want to be the old version of yourself, but at the same time, not being sure who you want to become. So you just are in this strange limbo, like you don't want to go back to the old you, but you also don't have a clear path forward to who or what you want to become. Another common symptom is just really high, increased sensitivity, emotional sensitivity. Your emotions feel more intense. You pick up on more. Maybe you pick up on the energies of other people or situations much more easily and readily than before. Or maybe even, the negative emotions, like you pick up on suffering and you're much more tuned in to just like the emotional energy that people and situations are putting out there. And this is one reason why one of the earlier points I made was about it's common to withdraw and just be more isolated during this time. One reason for that is this, that you feel emotions so much more intensely. It can be pretty uncomfortable and overwhelming, which is why a lot of people during this time tend to withdraw and just spend more time alone. Another sign is spiritual disconnection. No matter how strong your spiritual or religious practice may have been, even if you've always felt close to a higher power, you suddenly feel like, that power has gone silent. Like you don't really know where you fit in the scheme of things. You don't really know what you believe in anymore because you start to question everything. Another common experience is past traumas resurfacing. Maybe there are certain areas of your life where you've been through a lot and you have some old baggage and some old trauma, and you felt that you really did a lot of work there and transmuted a lot of that, and yet going through this process of the dark night of the soul, all that's coming back up. And it's all coming up at once, which is terrifying. So a lot of times these past traumas, even if we think we've done all the work necessary, they'll come up and it's a positive thing, even though it doesn't feel like it, because those old wounds coming up are coming up to be healed. So now you can deal with that trauma and once and for all transmute it. But in addition to all these other symptoms, you now have this old past trauma and baggage coming up, and it can be a very overwhelming experience. And then finally, another common sign is that you have a new desire for like radical change. Again, maybe you've been very happy in your job or a relationship, and then suddenly you feel like it doesn't serve you anymore. You could be in a job for 10, 20 years, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what? This just isn't me anymore. So it's really this identity crisis, or the same thing with a relationship. There are certain aspects of your current life that you think, you know what, I want to leave that behind because something inside of you is pushing for transformation. So now, how do we navigate this incredibly intense emotional time? Well, here are a few key things to keep in mind. One is you want to learn to surrender to the process. I know it's hard, but the more you resist, the more painful it becomes. You have to let yourself feel all these emotions, even some of the trauma and the difficult stuff you're carrying. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself grieve. I'm sure you're going to shed a few tears during the process as well. But trust that this process has a purpose. And then also, you want to go within. So this is a time for really deep introspection. Maybe journaling. Journaling I know can be really helpful. Meditating, spending time alone or spending time out in nature. Anything that you can do to just give yourself some alone time and really reconnect with yourself and become more acquainted with some of these thoughts and emotions that you're experiencing. Another way to face this is to not be afraid to let go of certain attachments. Many of the things that are falling away in your life during one of these periods very likely are meant to do so. They're not meant to stay. So allow yourself to release old situations, even people at times, or jobs, or emotions that just no longer serve you. So here's one more thing, and this is incredibly powerful. This is one of my favorites. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, what is this teaching me? Look at it through the lens of, this is happening for me. And if it's happening for you, then what is it teaching you? Because some of the greatest spiritual awakenings and spiritual progress are born from these really intense, dark, and difficult moments. And I know this from personal experience. Some of the most intensely difficult and dark times I've been through have then enabled me to really deal with a lot of old trauma and baggage I was carrying and transmute it, enlighten myself from that, and then move forward in like an incredibly powerful way. Of course, it's not fun to go through that process, but once you're on the other end, you see the wisdom behind all of it. And then finally, learn to trust this awakening process. So a dark night of the soul, as intense and difficult as it might feel in the moment, it's not the end. It's really a breakdown before the breakthrough that you're going to have. So you're being shaped into someone new, someone stronger, and someone more aligned with your true path. And that's going to mean going through this difficult time and letting go of certain things that no longer serve you. So if any of this resonated with you and you're going through a similar time, then I want you to know that you're not alone. A dark night of the soul is very painful and difficult, but it's also, in a way, an initiation into higher levels of consciousness. So you're going to come out of this transformed, with clarity, purpose, and with a much deeper connection to your true self and to the world. So I'm curious to know if you've gone through this before, or maybe you're going through it right now and you recognize some of these signs. If that's the case, I'd love to hear more about your story in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.